All right, let's dive into the world of the Hindu goddess Kali. Now, her image can be a bit intense, skulls, severed limbs, that wild hair. But trust me, there's way more to her than just what we see at first.
Yeah, you're right. Kali's image is usually the first thing people notice, and it definitely makes an impression. But it's kind of like looking at this one frame from a whole movie. You need the whole story, to really understand what's going on.
Okay, so let's do that. We're going to take a deep dive into who Kali is, what she represents, and even how her story connects with our own lives. You shared some articles and notes, so we're ready to uncover those hidden gems.
Fantastic. We can start with that seeming contradiction with Kali. The fact that she's both a destroyer and a creator. It's a paradox that in Hindu cosmology makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's what intrigued me when I was reading the stuff you sent. It's like, how can you be the force that ends things and the force that starts them?
Think of it like this. You know how a forest fire can be devastating, right? But it also makes way for new growth. It clears out all the dead wood. Kali's role in samsara, that endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, is similar. She's often shown as this, wicked mother figure, constantly giving birth to new life and then consuming it, driving that cycle forward.
So she's not just about destruction for no reason. It's more like she's clearing the path for new things to begin.
Exactly. And this leads us to another big idea, Maya, the veil of illusion. Kali's fierceness isn't just about physical destruction. She's also about shattering this illusion, the one that keeps us trapped in the material world, blinding us to spiritual truths.
You mentioned that Maya keeps us from seeing their spiritual truths. That's fascinating. Could you explain that a bit more? What does that actually mean for us, like practically?
Well, imagine wearing glasses that make you see things that aren't there, or that stop you from seeing things as they really are. That's kind of like Maya. It creates this illusion that makes us think we are separate, that we're attached to our things and our desires. It makes us forget who we really are and that we're connected to something much bigger.
Okay, so Kali helps us break free from that limited way of seeing things.
Exactly. It's like she's ripping off those glasses, forcing us to see the world and ourselves in a new way.
Her imagery, as intense as it is, makes a lot more sense now. Like a wake-up call,
Yeah.
a jolt to the system to break us out of that illusion. And it makes me think a lot of spiritual traditions have these scary, intense figures.
That's a great point. You've got figures like Dinesh who uses his axe to clear obstacles. Or even in Tibetan Buddhism, they have wrathful deities. They're not meant to scare us into submission. They're meant to shake us up,
Yeah.
and help us confront the things that are holding us back.
So it's not about being afraid of Kali. It's about understanding the deeper meaning behind that fierce image.
Precisely. And this connects to something else about Kali that we often miss, her connection to death. Now, I know that might sound a bit morbid, but death in Hindu thought isn't seen as the end. It's just a transition, a part of that endless cycle of samsara.
Right, she's so connected to that cycle of creation and destruction. Speaking of destruction, I remember reading in one of the articles from David Kinsley that Kali's boon, her gift, is freedom.
Yes. It's freedom that comes from confronting or accepting death. Now, it might sound like a contradiction, but when you really accept your own mortality, it can actually be incredibly liberating. Nothing else matters in the same way. You're free to really live authentically in this moment. Because this moment is all we truly have.
I never thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense. Once you let go of that fear of death, you're free to really live.
Absolutely. And Kali, with all her fierceness, embodies that radical acceptance of both life and death, of the light and dark within us all.
So it's not about wanting death or being reckless.
Mm.
It's about facing our fears, going beyond them, and finding that deeper freedom on the other side.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding that even in the darkest parts of existence, there's potential for growth, transformation, for something beautiful to emerge.
And this reminds me of another point from your material that I found really interesting. It's about Kali's role as a guide and protector, especially during times of personal change.
Yes, that's such an important part of her that's often overlooked. She's not just about destruction, she's also there to guide us through the darkness, to protect us during those tough times.
Like a fierce mother bear protecting her cubs.
Exactly. She's fierce, protective, and won't let anything stop our growth, even if it means tearing down our old beliefs and habits. It's a painful process for sure, but ultimately it's for our own good.
It's like she's saying, I'm going to push you, make you face your fears,
Hmm.
but I'll be there with you all the way.
And it's fascinating. This idea of a scary figure offering a path to redemption, to deeper understanding. It's not just in Hinduism.
Right, hold on. This is getting really interesting, but I think we need to pause here. Just let this all sink in for our listener. What do you think?
Absolutely. A pause is a good idea. Kali's multifaceted nature can be a lot to process.
So you were about to say that this idea of a fierce figure guiding us towards something positive isn't just in Hinduism. Tell me more.
Right. It's a universal thread running through different spiritual traditions. Think of figures like Yahweh from the Old Testament or even Jesus Christ. There's this talk of wrath, punishment, and then salvation. It's not always happy and nice, and I think that resonates with people because life itself isn't always sunshine and rainbows, is it?
Definitely not. I think we forget that sometimes, when we're always chasing happiness. But you're right, those figures, even though they can seem harsh, they are ultimately trying to help us find a deeper truth.
Exactly. And if we connect this back to Kali, it shows that universal idea that facing difficult truths, even when it's scary or uncomfortable, can lead to a richer, more authentic life. It's about accepting all of existence, the good and the bad, and finding a way to bring them together. That reminds me of a quote from Marion Woodman. She's a Jungian analyst. She wrote, "Kali is the greatest friend you could have because she is dark enough to absorb darkness. The unknowns, the evil, this goddess can contain that. Protect the ego, and with her sword, help you discriminate what must go, what can stay, what is evil, what is good. She can recognize the paradox and hold on to both."
Wow, that really gets to the heart of it. It's like she's saying Kali isn't afraid of the darkness. She embraces it.
Yeah.
And she can help us do the same.
Exactly. It's not about denying or hiding those darker parts of ourselves or our experiences. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and using them to transform. Kali helps us to see what serves us and what holds us back so we can make better choices.
So it's not just about facing our fear of death. It's about facing all our fears and things we're attached to that stop us from living authentically, right?
Precisely. Have you ever had a situation where you were scared to change, even though you knew you should?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So many times I've held on to something familiar,
Ugh.
even if it wasn't good for me, just because I was afraid of what I didn't know.
I get that. But Kali wants us to be brave, to step into the unknown, even when it's scary. And she shows us that after that fear, there's freedom that comes from being true to ourselves.
Yeah, that really hits home. There have been times when facing my fears head-on led to some of the most freeing experiences in my life. And it's funny because it connects back to that idea of Kali as a mother figure, even though she's often shown as this fierce, wild force.
That's a great point. I think sometimes we get so focused on her fierce, destructive side that we forget that she's also nurturing and protective, like how a mother fiercely protects her child. Kali protects us from the things that hold us back from reaching our potential. She guides us through tough times, showing us how to become the best versions of ourselves.
So instead of avoiding the hard stuff, the darkness, Kali shows us we can learn from it, grow from it, and even find a strange kind of beauty in it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. This idea of finding beauty in darkness and realizing there's potential for growth even in hard times is something that people from all cultures and time periods connect with. It's a universal truth that goes beyond any specific religion.
It's like she's saying, don't run from the darkness, embrace it, learn from it, grow from it, which is much easier said than done, but I think we all understand how powerful it can be to get through hard times and find strength where we didn't expect it.
Absolutely. And thinking about Kali this way, as a guide and protector, as a force that helps us navigate the darkness and come out stronger, reminds me of a story about one of her devotees.
Oh, I love stories. Tell me more.
So there's this legend about a young woman who was facing a situation that seemed impossible.
All right, so before we were talking about Kali's nurturing side, that protective energy,
Yeah.
and you were about to tell a story about one of her devotees.
Yeah, so this young woman was facing this really tough situation. It seemed hopeless. I think it was a serious illness.
Oh, wow. So she went to Kali as like a last resort. That's interesting.
Yeah, and what's even more interesting is how she approached Kali. She didn't beg or plead for help. Instead, she just surrendered completely to Kali's power, acknowledging how vulnerable she felt and her fear. She basically said, "I'm yours. Do what you will."
That's powerful. To just let go like that with all that uncertainty takes a lot of courage.
It really does. But here's the thing. In that moment of surrender, the young woman found this deep sense of peace. She realized that even if she died, even with all the suffering, there was something bigger, a divine presence with her. And the legend says she was miraculously healed.
Wow, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
It's like she found that freedom we talked about, the freedom that comes from accepting things as they are, even when it's scary.
Exactly. And that story for me really captures Kali's essence. She's not there to punish us or make us miserable. She's there to help us face our deepest fears, to go with the flow of life and death. And to see that even in the darkest times, there's this divine power holding us, guiding us, and setting us free.
So it's not about avoiding the darkness. It's about going through it with Kali leading the way. And maybe even finding some kind of beauty in those dark places.
You said that perfectly. And this idea of finding beauty in darkness makes me think of something else about Kali's image that we haven't talked about yet. Her black skin.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering about that. What does it mean?
Well, in Hinduism, black represents the infinite, the void, the place where all creation begins. It's not seen as bad or evil, it's the source of all potential, all possibilities.
So Kali's black skin represents that raw creative energy, that unlimited potential.
Exactly. It's like she's saying, I have everything inside me that ever was, is, and will be. And that's so empowering because it means we have that same potential within us, too.
Wow, that's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
So instead of fearing the darkness, the unknown, we can see it as the source of our own creative power, our own ability to change.
Exactly. And this takes us back to our first question. What can we learn from Kali? I think she teaches us to accept everything about life, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, life and death. She shows us that by facing our fears, letting go, and accepting our own darkness, we can find a power and freedom we never knew we had.
It's like that quote we talked about, Kali's ability to take in the darkness and help us see the difference between good and evil. It's not about pretending the darkness isn't there, but learning to deal with it, to use it to help us grow and change.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need to push ourselves to challenge what we think we know and maybe even get a little uncomfortable to really get what Kali has to offer.
That's it. Kali isn't for people who are scared to look deep inside. She challenges us, pushes us, makes us face the parts of ourselves we want to hide. But by doing that, she helps us become more whole, more true to ourselves, and ultimately more free.
So what would you say to someone who might be a little intimidated by Kali, by her fierce image and everything she represents?
I'd say don't be afraid to come to her with an open mind and a curious heart. You don't have to worship her or believe anything specific. Just let yourself feel her energy and the wisdom she has.
And maybe ask yourself, what parts of Kali connect with me? What can I learn from her about facing my own fears, accepting my own darkness, and living a more honest and brave life?
Those are great questions to think about. And, even if you never fully understand Kali, even if she seems mysterious and intimidating, just trying to understand her wrestling with these complicated ideas can change you.
It's like we've gone deep, not just into Hindu mythology, but into our own minds. I know I've learned so much from this conversation, and I hope our listener has too.
Me too. It's been amazing exploring Kali's many sides, and I think the journey keeps going for each of us as we take these lessons and apply them to our lives.
So listener, we leave you with this final thought. How can you embrace the Kali within?